The advantages of participating in any trial is majority of the trials are not geared like a regular clinical practice. In clinical trials, you're coming in more frequently. You have the one-on-one contact more frequently. We're more accessible to you.
You're having MRIs maybe every 6 months depending on a particular trial, so you're certainly at a monitoring that you would never expect if you were not in a clinical trial.
Clinical trials patients are in the clinic more often, so they get more access to their neurologists and other safety assessments.
Yeah, I was in the clinic quite frequently because my white blood cell count would go up and down and it needed to be monitored. I was concerned about it, but I was thankful I was in a study being monitored because maybe in a regular practice they would not have been able to monitor me so carefully.
The participant gets free medication, especially in these economic times. That's a real advantage to people. They get the opportunity to be on medication without direct cost.
The advantages to participating in the trials would probably most obviously be the access to the drug before it's approved. So some of these therapies are very promising.
The other benefit I found in being involved in a clinical trial is being able to come into the clinic on these appointments and you're not in isolation with your illness, to be in an area where you have knowledgeable people in the staff or those you're sitting in the hall with waiting for the next test all have some form of MS, and you sort of hear their coping skills and how they're handling a particular symptom, and you sort of go, oh, maybe I'll try that next time. I hadn't heard that before.
It should be recognized that not everybody needs to be a part of a clinical trial. It's just too much trouble for some people, and we certainly respect that.
A patient has to really consider before they enter a clinical trial that it's the right decision for them. So they really have to take a look at the information and consent form and make sure it's a good fit.
The treatment may be too dangerous for their type of MS, or it may not be strong enough for their type of MS. And then finally, we have to realize that the treatments being tested in a clinical trial are not known to work.
It may, in fact, be less effective than what's currently on the market.
Frequently, trials are blinded, meaning that neither the participants nor the investigators know what the participants are being treated with.
I should add that for a certain part of the time in the clinical trial, you might be on the comparator drug, and that comparator drug may be a drug that you don't particularly like or are not interested in. The comparator drug might be a placebo.
Most people get into a clinical trial because they want to get the good stuff. They want to get the new treatment. But almost every trial compares the new treatment to something else. And they need to ask themselves, would they be comfortable getting something else?
Sometimes participating in a clinical trial or being on a certain medication can actually exclude you from participation in another clinical trial or having that therapy in the future.
Another disadvantage is that we have more frequent visits. So if there are patients that are in the work field, it might be more cumbersome for them to actually get into all the appointments.
There may be side effect risks from the drug.
Everybody knows that when they do a human trial, there's a risk. 6 years later, after I had finished the trial, I got a letter in the mail saying, because you took this medication, your heart could be weakened and you have to go for ultrasounds yearly. Even though everything's been fine for 2 years, it's kind of scary because you don't know what's going to happen.
To learn about new drugs and to test new drugs in a clinical trial, we could not do it without the participants.
My participation in a clinical trial was really important to me.
I definitely wanted that control back. And when I did some research and found out about a trial that was available, I thought, well, I think I'm available to do it, and I think I'm going to be somebody who would be a good candidate.
Speaking, with my doctor about the trial when he, offered the suggestion, and you'd sort of ask, why should I do a trial? Besides just the benefit for research, is there something that may be valuable for myself or to help me?
My family and friends, when I decided to participate in a trial, were unbelievably supportive. I mean, my husband was amazing through this whole process, and he was just as confused and scared as I was, being newly diagnosed with MS. So realistically, I think the study actually helped us deal with the whole thing and make decisions.
If I was going to go through that extent of sacrifice, then I wanted other people to learn too, and I wanted other people to benefit from it.
I think there's a real selfless component that they're doing it not just for themselves, but for all MS patients to try to improve data and information. And I think that that's a wonderful thing.
There might be a variety of different reasons why people enter, but it's important from my point of view that they understand that they should have personal reasons for entering and not try to be satisfying friends, family, loved ones, investigators, or other people.
The doctors need all of the data available from all of us if they're going to be able to find a cure.
Both groups need one another for this to succeed. Researchers need people willing to join clinical trials. People with MS need researchers working on their behalf. And together we will find the answer, and together we will reach the end of MS in the shortest possible time.
The National MS Society funds research worldwide. We invest close to $40 million a year in university research. We have targeted research efforts that go towards nerve repair and regeneration in MS. We have our Promise 2010 initiative, which really is one of our signature initiatives that is really being directed towards how do we rebuild the brain in MS.
And all these research areas are important, and we couldn't do all the support without our constituents, our chapters, people who give money to the National MS Society in terms of our Walk MS or our Bike MS events, or just give money to support research. We couldn't do this without them.
For 15 years, we have funded a large study that looks at the genetic component of MS in a Canadian population. This is not a small endeavor. It's taken 15 years. It has been funded at a level of over $15 million, and it has happily resulted in a collaboration between all of the major MS centers in Canada. Currently, the database that holds information on 30,000 families with MS in Canada is one of the largest in the world. Mining this very rich database, we have answers to questions that have concerned people for many years.
Fast Forward is a wholly owned subsidiary of the National MS Society. We were created to fund innovative research that's being done in young biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies who really are developing innovative therapies for people with MS. There are lots of young companies that are actually taking on and thinking about MS in a new way. And so they might have worked, say, in Alzheimer's disease, but they now think that their strategy might apply to MS. At the end of the day, every therapy is going to have to go through a clinical trial. And so our role can be either to fund the early development of the drug, or actually to come in and provide resources for the company when they're doing an actual clinical trial. Or if they don't need our resources but perhaps need our relationships, we will connect them to physicians who can do the clinical trials for them.
I'm personally very inspired by the courage and commitment of MS patients who go into clinical trials.
Just their dedication to the program and to coming in and making their mark on research. You know, we couldn't get anywhere without the participation of these patients. It's invaluable, really.
We really appreciate their efforts, their integrity, their wanting to try and help both themselves and others.
It's so rewarding to see them, getting better, getting more comfortable with their disease and kind of owning it a little bit, and saying, I'm going to take control of this.
I have to hang on to the hope knowing that in my lifetime, they will find the cure.
I think it is a very hopeful field right now. There's quite a few research options. There's new drugs coming out, new drugs being investigated, which is always positive.
I think MS is a poster child of success in neurology. We've transformed this disease with treatments in our lifetime, in our generation. And to be participating in that, and to see that happen, and to be participating in the novel treatments that are coming up, I can't think of any greater excitement that somebody could have that has an interest in MS at this time.
When you attend one of these neurology meetings where all the scientists gather, MS is truly represented. In fact, when you talk to the people who organize these meetings, They receive more scientific papers about multiple sclerosis than any other neurologic disease.
I also look to the fact that we have many, many more drugs that are currently in clinical trial for relapsing remitting and even for progressive MS. And it's my great hope that we get much more effective therapies in the future for this disease.
My hope for the future with patients with MS is that patients are started earlier on medication, that the information about medications that are already marketed or clinical trials are out there so that they can take advantage of these medications and hopefully alter the course of the disease.
We're living with a disease, a chronic disease that does not have a cure. Yes, there are challenges. Yes, there are things that are really not very nice, but I have to give myself a little bit more credit. You are stronger. You can fight this. You can go on and know that tomorrow is going to be a brighter day.